Not at all. Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Reba. I do the marketing and sales for Good Agriculture. We're excited to talk to you all about the business of farming. But before we get started, I'll pass it on over to our CEO, Alex.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. I am one of the founders and the CEO of Good Agriculture. To give this super brief overview of what we do, we are a small business in Georgia, so next door from y'all in Alabama. And we help farmers with their back offices because we know that as farmers, y'all are super busy. The farm keeps you, takes all of your hours. And so we're here to help with things like the bookkeeping, the marketing, finding grants, et cetera, so that you have more time for the farm. And I'd like to thank Rachel for hosting us today.
Hi, everyone. You may know me, you may not. My name is Rachel Debose. I'm the manager of farmer programs here at ASAN, or the Alabama Sustainable Agriculture Network, if you're just passing through. We are a small grassroots organization in Alabama that provide resources, support, organizing, advocacy, and opportunities for sustainable farmers. We are here partnering with Good Agriculture, who have been so gracious to come and speak to us about their business and tips and tricks for farmers just like you to be more successful and more adept in running your businesses. So yeah, I'll pass it back to Reba.
Awesome. So we like to say that we know that everything is hard when you are farming. But what we notice is, of course, the easiest part is growing food. Farmers wear a lot of hats, and we understand that. So as Alex mentioned before, you have to deal with so much on the farm already that we want to be able to help you wear less hats. So we help you out when it comes to bookkeeping, marketing, and sales. You know, these are things as a farmer that you have to think of as a small business owner. Planning, and of course, just having additional things and different legs that you have to manage on the farm. So what we're going to talk about is how to tackle that and optimize that for your farm. So we'll get started by letting you know a little bit more about us, and then I'll pass it over to Alex so that way she can tell you about bookkeeping. So what is Good Agriculture? As Alex mentioned before, we like to help farmers on the business side of things. So we help out in three main areas because we are experts when it comes to business, finance, marketing, and of course, tech. And our mission is really to help our farmers be able to stick to farming. And then we help them with back office services. So anything from getting monthly reports for bookkeeping to also knowing which product is the most profitable to also finding that grant for you. That's what we are made for, is to make it just a little bit easier for farmers because we already know that farming is pretty hard. Alrighty, Alex.
Yeah, so I'm glad to have this conversation kind of at the beginning of what should be the off season. Now the weather is still nice outside, so hopefully we've got a few more weeks in the growing season. But we know that things tend to slow down over the winter, and so it can be a really good time to step back and think about what is your farm's business plan. You do this because you love it, but you love some things more than other. Where do you want to spend your energy, your time, and your money? So we encourage folks to take some time and create a business plan during the off season. So think about, what am I going to grow? How am I going to sell it? How much of it do I need to sell to be able to cover my cost? What are some things that could go wrong if I produce 20% less? Is my farm still financially viable? Am I going to need a loan or grant or any point during the season to help cover my costs? And so there are lots of good resources to think through this. We have some templates we can share. University Extension can be a great resource. There are often other resources like small business development centers that can help you think through this. And of course, other farmers and folks like ASON can help you, think through like what's worked for them, where might there be some opportunity in your local market, what is no one else doing, and kind of where are you uniquely positioned to grow something that people really love. Now, of course, if you have a business plan, you actually are going to need to track it during the season itself. So I know this is not everyone's favorite topic, but we are going to spend a couple minutes talking about bookkeeping. Reba, if you can go to the next slide there. So Bookkeeping is really just keeping track on a month-to-month basis how much money actually came into your business and how much money went out. Um, and this is really important to keep track questions like how much money did you actually make? Were you profitable? Which products were profitable and which maybe were not? Are you able to get your taxes filed on time? Do you know how much you're going to owe in taxes? Do you know how much you're going to owe in, federal income taxes? Do you owe any state and local sales taxes? What about your property taxes? It can really help you plan for stuff like that. And then importantly on farms, we know that cash is king. It is super common for farmers to be profitable, but still struggle to have enough cash in the bank account. So do you know when you're likely to be tight on cash? Is it, during planting season when you have to buy all the seeds and the inputs and, everything else that comes up, but before you've started selling? Do you need to go talk to your bank or to any other resources to help you get your capital? Um, Now, again, there are lots of resources here. Again, we have templates to help you track your books. There's lots of software options. QuickBooks and Xero are the two biggest ones, but there's a bunch of other ones like Ambrook and FarmRaise, Traction Ag, things like that. And then, of course, there are folks like us who are actually agriculture bookkeepers and can just do it for you. And I think we have some tips and tricks on the next page, Reba. So if you haven't done bookkeeping before, so first off, we are actually hosting a more in-depth webinar series on this topic. So we'll spend a whole hour on bookkeeping, and then a whole hour on prepping for tax season, and then a whole hour on kind of more advanced financial management topics. So we're going to give just some super quick tips today. But basically, if I'm saying anything and you're like, I don't know if I know how to do this, please definitely come to those webinars, and we'll go really in depth there. Also, feel free to reach out to us if you're not able to join the webinars, and we're happy to send you the recordings afterwards. So, when you're actually setting up your books, the most important thing, and if you take nothing else from this webinar for 2026, make it a goal to keep your business accounts and your personal accounts separate. Create a separate bank account, get a different separate business only credit card if that's something you use. The more you can disentangle those kinds of expenses, the easier it's going to be to keep track of stuff. If you use a lot of checks or a lot of e-commerce platforms, take some time to set that up and make it easy for you to track. We personally think that checks can be kind of hard to keep track of, remembering like what did you actually write that check for. So make sure you put a detailed memo on it. And then if you're using something like Square or Shopify or Local Line or any of those ag specific e-commerce platforms, take some time to set up your products in those platforms. That way, as you make sales, those platforms can help you keep track of how much you sold when. And then that data is there for you to refer back to at the end of the season and see like, okay, what actually made me money? And really the most important thing is like just come up with some kind of process that works for you that you can keep up with at least monthly. And it's really worth setting the time over the off season to think about like what categories do I want to use? How do I want to track my receipts? When do I actually want to sit down and like catch up on all this stuff? Do I want to like just wait for the first, rainy day of the month? Or, is like, the first Monday of the month going to be my bookkeeping day? Just come up with some kind of process that works for you. As far as like, and I mentioned the word categories. So, keeping track of like which expense goes in which bucket can be kind of hard to figure out. People have a lot of different preferences about what makes sense to them. But if you need a place to start, Google the IRS Schedule F form. So this is the tax form that farmers have to fill out every year. And it's got a bunch of different categories on it already. And so we recommend those categories as a starting place because, to be honest, they're pretty good. But then also when it comes time to file your taxes, your books are already aligned to what the tax form says, so it really expedites that process. Now, and Rachel, I think you had a question about different ways people can track stuff.
Yeah. So I just thought it would be great if you could spend some time talking about the pros and cons to different kinds of tracking methods when it comes to bookkeeping, and kind of how that connects to a farmer's individual business goals.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because the second bullet here mentions accounting software. So there's kind of like three tiers of ways you can track your books. So one is just like the good old paper ledger. It's simple, it's cheap. It can just sit on your desk. You can just fill it out whenever you have a chance. And that works for simple businesses that don't have a lot of transactions, or, people who just prefer having a paper version of something. Um, Now, because it's not automated, it can be a little bit time consuming, and it also, it's not checking your math for you. So, it's easy to make errors. So, we do recommend that just for kind of like smaller businesses who don't have that many transactions, who just need something simple and easy. And kind of as you get bigger and start to have more transactions each month, maybe something more like a spreadsheet can be a good fit for you. Now, the beauty of spreadsheets is, again, they're free. You're not paying anybody for anything. You can kind of customize it so it makes sense to you. And especially if you're someone who's comfortable with spreadsheets, it can be pretty easy to set up. Now, again, the drawbacks are, as you start to be a larger business, there's more transactions you got to type in manually. That can start to get a little bit hard to keep up with. And then, of course, again, if you're not comfortable with spreadsheets, then I wouldn't recommend starting here. So for the folks who, don't want to do it manually, want something that'll check its math, or, your business is starting to grow to the point where like you really have to put some effort into keeping track of all the stuff, that's where the accounting softwares come in. So the two we have seen used the most often are QuickBooks and Xero. I imagine a lot of y'all are going to be familiar with QuickBooks. Now, QuickBooks is great software, but it has a lot of different features in it, and that can be really hard for folks to figure out. So if you're looking for something a little bit simpler, you don't necessarily need all like the invoicing and the payroll and the Square integrations that QuickBooks has. We recommend something called Xero. It's spelled Xero. It's basically, simpler, more user-friendly software. It'll still do all the good work of pulling in your bank transactions for you, helping you auto categorize things, making your reporting nice and easy. But it, just to be honest, like it's harder for you to mess it up by like messing with some of the accounting features that really are designed for like CPAs and not for business owners. So yeah, Rachel, anything else you've heard from the folks you've worked with about like which methods kind of work for them?
The majority of the farmers that I speak to they kind of run the gambit depending on how much business they're doing. QuickBooks you hear about. Xero I have not heard about. So I'm sure that there will be people who are very interested to kind of learn and explore more about that. But yeah, I think the majority of the farmers in our network kind of manage their own finances in the best way they know how.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as far as, folks who don't want to go the accounting software option, like I said, we have templates for managing this yourself in spreadsheets. There's an organization called Veggie Compass that also has some good free templates. So feel free to reach out to us or them to be able to, grab something that just can help you get started. One trick about tracking your expenses. So in general, just tracking the money that comes in as revenue and the money that goes out as expenses is sufficient to get started as a business owner. But it is really key if you have loans to make sure that every time you make a loan payment, you do split out how much of that payment was interest versus how much of that was principal paying down the balance of the loan. And so that'll help you keep track over time of how much of that loan you actually owe left versus how much interest you paid, which, by the way, is one of the things you need to put on your Schedule F form during tax time. And then as far as the sales side, we already mentioned keeping track of sales by products. Sorry, Reba, mind going back one more time? I promise we're getting to taxes. I know that's the thing everybody's probably going to be worried about soon here. But the last thing to say here is like, do be thoughtful about the number of sales channels you use. If you're using, a Square reader and you're taking Venmo and you're taking Cash App and you're taking just straight good old cash and you're also sending invoices to people, like that can get really complicated to manage. The more you can try to just like pick one platform and encourage your customers to all use that one, the easier it's going to be to keep up with this stuff. All right, now we can get to taxes. So I know we're still 5 months away from tax day, but it is going to sneak up on you, especially if you're working with the CPA, getting them your final 2025 transactions, sometime in January, so they have plenty of time to work with you is really going to make their lives easier. If you go to an accountant on like April 1st and you're like, hey, can you help me out with my taxes? They probably are not going to be too happy with you. Other thing to keep in mind is payroll taxes. If you have W-2 employees, make sure you are keeping up with your payroll taxes. Usually if you have W-2 employees, we highly recommend using some kind of payroll software in order to just keep up with that, because they'll auto calculate that stuff and you don't have, and they'll file it for you. Just makes your life so much easier, and it's worth the $40 a month or whatever it is you have to do. As far as sales tax, actually, Rachel, this is a question for you. So in Georgia, there's a program called the Gate Card where farmers can get a little card, and every time they go to Lowe's or Home Depot to get something for the farm, they don't have to pay sales tax on that. Does Alabama have any kind of program like that?
I don't, I've never heard of such a program. That doesn't say the program doesn't exist. So I will do my due diligence and
Okay.
if I find out, I will put it in the information with the video.
Okay, cool. Yeah, a lot of states have just like nice tax setups for farmers. Speaking of which, on your property taxes, there are homestead and agriculture exemptions. Again, I'm not exactly sure what Alabama's date is, but most states, if you live on the farm, or if the farm is a farm and it doesn't have an agriculture exemption yet, oftentimes that is due in the spring. April 1st is a really common due date. So do look up, what the date is in Alabama. And if you haven't gotten those property tax exemptions for your farm yet, that is definitely something to look into and tackle over the winter. Okay, so now we're going to go from taxes to a topic everyone likes way more, which is finding money for your farm. So there are a few different sources of funding out there for farmers. So one, there are a ton of grants out there. We know of like 700 different programs across the country. There are lots at the federal level. Oftentimes there's lots at the state and local level. Oftentimes nonprofits will have some as well. So it can be a good thing to look into what programs are available over the winter and kind of start scoping out like which ones am I going to want to apply to this year. Now, unfortunately, a lot of these programs love to have application windows in the spring and the fall when farmers are busy. They don't make it very convenient, but it's helpful to kind of know like what time of year those deadlines are going to be so that you can kind of plan ahead. Now, we have a tool that can help you figure out what you're eligible for, and again, start to like do some research on what things are going to be a good fit for you. So if you go to goodagriculture.com/FES, that's short for Funding Eligibility Survey. It's like a 5-minute survey. We'll ask you a bunch of yes/no questions about your farm, and then we'll send you the full list of stuff that we know about that you're eligible for. Most farmers are eligible for like 40 or 50 different programs. So just a couple of points around grants versus loans versus other things. So grants are great. They are free money. You don't have to pay it back. But going back to the topic about taxes, most of them are taxable income as revenue. So this is why keeping up with your books and your expenses is really important, because if you're doing a grant program, you probably have a lot of expenses associated with executing that grant. So, your time, any equipment you buy, any supplies you get, et cetera, et cetera. And so you want to make sure that for all that grant money that came in, you've got the expenses against it, so it's not counting as profit that can get taxed. And then as far as applying to these grants, so for a lot of the state and local grants, they're designed to be easier and for farmers to be able to fill them out themselves. But oftentimes, the grant organization will have webinars about how to fill out the grant, and they're very helpful if you reach out and you ask for help. For some of the bigger federal grants, these can be very meaty and very hard to apply for, and so it might be worth talking to a professional grant writer. Again, that's a process you should start early. So if you're interested in applying for like a value-added producer grant or something like that, reach out to a grant writer early. they'll give you an honest assessment of like if you're going to be a good fit or not, if it's worth the cost. And then, you'll want to start that process early, make sure you have plenty of time to put in a good application before the deadline. Um, so that's kind of on the grant side. Then on the loan side, there's lots of different loan programs for farmers, especially for beginning farmers. FSA loans are an awesome deal. A lot of them are kind of at like a 4 to 5% interest rate, which is way lower than what the market rate is right now. They have micro loans, which are $50,000 or less. They have operating loans. They have loans to get land. So those are really great to look at. Just know that they are administered county by county, and county agents, some of them are super helpful. Some of them are new and like don't quite know everything yet. So if you're getting funky answers from your county agent, it may be worth reaching out to the state office and just making sure that you've got what you need to be a good applicant. And then of course, there's many other loans out there in terms of banks and other things. There are also a few other unique types of funding programs that we've got in our database. So there's things like ecosystem credits, like, hey, I am, improving biodiversity on my farm. Someone will pay me for protecting that biodiversity. There's also things like rental payments. So like the Conservation Reserve Program that the USDA runs, if you set aside some of your land for conservation purposes, they'll pay you on a per acre basis. There's things like tax credits out there. So again, I'd really just recommend taking the survey, seeing what's out there, and then digging into what's a good fit for you. There's a lot of unique opportunities out there if you go digging for them.
For sure. And I'll jump in. So, you are great at growing, but the problem is if you're growing and then you don't have any customers to buy, that becomes a really big problem for your farm. So of course, we like to talk about the sales and marketing because we know how important it is for you to be able to get your products out to those customers. So we give this example where it's like you have this great supply of the harvest or you just harvested, and then now you're thinking of, I need to go and have customers there, have customers in front of you. If you are waiting until you harvest, you might be waiting too late. We like to say that it is better to start marketing in the off season and also getting your plan together, communicating with your customers outside of selling to them, and really building that relationship. So that way, when it is time for you to harvest and when you are looking to sell your products, they are more likely to purchase. So, we do have resources available for you. Of course, Good Agriculture, we help you with the marketing and sales side for your farm. But also there are websites that you can, different website platforms that you can use, such as Shopify, Squarespace, WordPress, just to have your website up. And of course, there are branding workshops that are there and just different ways of being able to reach your customers, whether it is not paid, whether it's just running on your social media or through paid opportunities on social media. And then you also have it online and beyond. So we talk about, we have this scale going on where, of course, the first box that you see over there is direct to consumer, or direct to customer, and then it goes all the way up to commodity sales. Rachel, I believe you said that your farmers really stick to retail stores. Okay, so we'll just stay there. So what we like to say is that, of course, this is an ongoing scale that you increase. So as you are going along, you're going to need to put a lot more effort, or you're supposed, sorry. So as you are going along the scale, the requirements will increase. So if you are looking toward going and being placed into retail stores, then you're going to have more certifications there. It's not going to be as simple as it would be from selling from your farm. There might be requirements that are needed for you to sell into a store.
I would say, sorry
Mhm.
to interrupt. I
Yeah.
would say retail stores kind of exist as the barrier, or even more like the limit of where a lot of our farmers go. So we'll see like
Okay.
direct to consumer a lot, CSAs a lot, farmers markets, some co-ops we're seeing, some food hubs we're seeing, and then
Okay.
kind of edging into retail.
Okay. And with that, I know that we reach out on behalf of farmers as well to get them placed into retail stores and to restaurants. And I don't know if this has been a barrier for your farmers, so I would love to hear from you. But of course, it is about pestering them to get that placement in there. And sometimes it can take a few months. I'm sure you're nodding your head, so we're in agreement for it. And it can take a few months to do so. And even though we said that the marketing effort decreases, it's just shifted in a different way. So we like to say that it becomes where it could feel like a revolving door, just continuing to have that same conversation happening. But it is important for you to continue that conversation and be steadfast about it. They all have their seasons. And what we have noticed is when we reach out on behalf of farmers, depending on the product, sometimes they have contracts where you have to follow up at a certain time, and being diligent with following up is helpful as well. But you'll also see that as you are going into retail stores and beyond, your price decreases because you don't have to put so much effort where you're trying to get to individual customers, but instead you are really just having it where you're placing it in that big store. We like to say Publix or Whole Foods or anything like that. Um, Go ahead, Rachel. I know you're going to say something.
I know we talked about, knowing what you are intending to sell before
Mhm.
it's time and having all that other stuff in place. So could you like spend some time talking about those more long-term planning aspects and things that farmers
Yeah.
need to think about when they're looking to get into certain kinds of markets?
Yeah. Let's do it. So first and foremost, just seeing if what product you are venturing out to growing, even fits your audience, right? So we like to tell our farmers that it's better to check out the market with a market analysis before you actually get started, because this market analysis helps you and helps farmers understand who is buying, what they are paying, and what sales channels make the most sense for them. So a simple market analysis can save farmers money and, of course, help you focus on what they really want. And with that, it's kind of broken down where we talk about who your ideal customer is, and then also you check out the demand around the area that you're planning on selling. Sometimes that means calling a few retail stores, right? Like we mentioned before, just hearing to see if that is a product that they're holding, and if it is, how often is that being sold, is good to know as well. Going over and surveying different farm stands, as you mentioned before, and co-ops, just to see if that product is selling, is helpful there. And then really figuring out where your market fit is. We like to say that, of course, we can go and check out to see the competition that's out there. We can go and see what the demand is, but also knowing how you're going to differentiate your product in comparison to another farm is helpful too. And of course, this takes time because you're already thinking about what you're going to be growing, and you're already planning for planting, but taking some time out to really see what market makes the most sense. And I know you spoke about the markets and you were saying, like, how do we know what is a great fit? And with that, we like to say that it's better to take the conservative approach, right, than to get started right away and then just jump into wholesale. So it's really feeling out the market in that way. So beyond the market analysis, then you go and then you're able to have it where you at least try to get some pre-orders to see if even that is a rumbling up of a conversation for farmers or for new customers for your farm. And then also with that, you can be conservative by selling directly from your farm first before getting started, and then potentially venturing out into a market. And then, of course, being able to go to a farmer's market once and then seeing how it feels. And then, of course, committing to how you are able to grow. So you basically move along with the volume there. Rachel, did you have any other questions on this?
No, I think you really covered it. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to spend some time talking about why it's important to focus on off-season planning for your marketing. But let's jump into it. Okay. So as I mentioned before, farmers usually think that marketing matters only when the product is ready. And we all know that at that point, it's a little bit too long for that. Um, and we would say like during this off season, it's a great time to kind of slow down and look at what worked, what didn't work, and then make decisions for that next season. There may be a product that sold better than others. And you may want to figure out investing more time into that or putting advertising dollars where it's for that specific product there. Um, as we all know, we're all on social media. So we all have that short-term memory there. So customers have short memories. So staying visible to them and having that conversation with them before they have to buy makes it feel like it's a relationship that's being built. And of course, we like to say that a little bit of marketing now can save you hours and help you sell more later. So we talk about continuing that conversation with customers, but how do you do that, right? How can you do that on your personal platform? So I'm going to give you a few examples of just ways for you to connect with potential customers and simple ways that we tell our farmers and we help our farmers with. Let's start with social media, right? Because everyone's on there, like I mentioned before. So customers love seeing farm life and see what you're doing, of course, behind the scenes as you're planning. So even if it's one post a week, it keeps you top of mind when it comes to your followers and for your customers. And during the off season, you might be wondering like, what's the best thing that you can post because you're not harvesting at this point in time, but you can still talk about your winter chores or any tasks that you have there, what you're doing to plan for next season. You can always tease out, right? We were talking about it before, where it's just new products that will be coming out. And then also getting your customers to prepare by having pre-orders that are there. So that way it also helps you before you actually come to harvest. Like I mentioned, with that, we also have options and opportunities to show what's happening behind the scenes. And then you're able to tell your audience about your practices and what you do. And at this time, this is what we work on, but throughout, our busy season, this is how it really looks for us. And you get those relationships going. Um, this is where we support our farmers as well. So we would build content calendars for our farmers, really create posts, edit videos, and try to keep everything consistent so you don't have to do it alone. We work with our farmers really to match their tones because just because one farmer speaks one way does not mean it's a catch-all for all farmers. So we try to be very intentional about that. You think about that as you're doing your storytelling, what your brand sounds like, what your farm sounds like as well. And, also they just want to see you. It doesn't have to look pretty, but they do want to know that they are giving for a cause bigger than just I'm purchasing this and this is healthy for me, but also I know that I'm supporting this farm. I want to give another example just so you can see outside of social media. We all have emails, we always get those newsletters. So I want to show you an example of how we use those newsletters to talk to our farmers' customers and get them to purchase. Okay, so this is an example on the left-hand side where you can see a newsletter that we send out on behalf of a farm. So it typically goes out monthly, and this farmer specifically, he delivers in 2 states, in Florida and in Georgia. So with this, we spend some time talking about any specials they have there, but also we give a personal update on what's going on the farm. We always start off that way because we want to make sure that, especially with this farm, to be transparent with their customers and let them know what has happened throughout that month as he is preparing to deliver to any potential customers. And that newsletter also has it where it's top of mind. It pops up in customers' inboxes, and then also you can always incentivize them by adding on a special or an offer for your customers to purchase, and then also give them a reward for being a repeat customer. Outside of that, right, we have other tools that we like to suggest for our farmers. So the first one you see there is search engine optimization and website enhancements. So that is just a fancy way of just being that you want to be on the top of Google. And you want when someone searches a specific product that your farm beats any other competition that's going out there. So with that, there are ways that you can enhance your website, which means that you're just constantly making updates to your website. Google likes to know that this is an active website, right? If you haven't touched your website in couple months, a couple years, it'll then fall off of the first page and then continue to keep on falling lower. So that's why it's good to keep on making edits and really just working on updating your website there. Also, as you know, having a website helps you with getting online sales. So it makes it a lot easier. And of course, discoverability always equals sales. Where if someone doesn't know about you, at least they can keep you in on top of mind and they can subscribe to your newsletter, right? Or follow you on social media, but have it where even if they don't convert as a customer right away, they are someone that's looking closely at you as an opportunity to purchase later on. And then jumping on to that last bullet point where you see seasonal campaigns, like we mentioned before, you can have it where you have a discount that you can offer to your customers, and also have it where it's share with a friend and you and your friend can get a 10% off discount. Just think of ways that is very helpful for you. You know, it's holiday season right now. Thanksgiving is coming up soon. So, you know, doing a bundle and save is always great to get your products out there. And also just thinking about when you peak at harvest, like that's also a good time of seeing, are you also peaking at sales? If not, how can we get there? Okay. So Rachel, I wanted to make sure you didn't have any questions on marketing before we turn it over to Alex.
Um, this is, I think this is a marketing question. It might exist somewhere in
Okay.
between the marketing and the back end,
Yeah.
but I was curious if you had any tips for farmers who are looking to get a better idea of how they should price their products. Because that's a
Ooh, that's a
question that we get a
great
lot.
question. Yeah. Yeah. So jumping back to the market analysis, right? So as we were talking about before, where we kind of see what the competition is pricing it at is always a good way. Especially if they are planning on selling more locally. It's always good to make sure that you're within the ballpark. But something beyond that that we do is we also look because there are ways that you can also see reports for the market in general for that specific product. So we would like to also see how it is, whether it is within the state, regionally, or within the US. So that way you can see what the average price is. But also considering pricing, you would also have to think about the cost that you're doing for production. So just that way you're not operating at a loss, right? Because if you are putting in $5 worth of work and you're only selling a product that's $3, then you know that you're always losing on that. So also keeping that in mind is helpful. That was a great question. Any other marketing questions that you think would be helpful for your farmers?
Um, Another one does come to mind.
Yeah.
A lot of the farmers in our network, and this I imagine is subject to change just because of the nature of it, but a lot of the farmers in our network are kind of starting to age out. And so,
Hmm.
kind of, I'm curious about how we adapt, how we make the more technological side of marketing and social
Yeah.
media a little more approachable for people who otherwise would not necessarily
No, I
use,
get it.
but it's like necessary for them to be successful business owners.
Right. Right. No, every time we have a farmer that gets started, they're like, I do it, but I don't really love it. You know, that's kind of the thing where it's like, I would actually not want to be on social media. And that's completely understandable. So what we say is if you do not want to do it yourself, because like you said, you may be aging out of it, or for whatever reason, you just don't have the time to do so. What we like to say is just tap into your tools and your resources where if you do have it where it's a tolerance for it, you can always come up with a schedule and a plan. And then you can plan out what posts you have there. Meta has a good job of doing a calendar or a content schedule. So even if a farmer has a weekend and they know that I want to get out 4 posts throughout the month, let me go and spend some time here. They can always use that scheduler. It's free, but you still have to get on that platform. So if they don't want to do it, then of course we say to look into their resources, because even though they don't want to do it, they have other things they have to do. Maybe that is a way that you have to outsource. And that's where companies like us, like Good Agriculture and other companies, are there to make sure that if the farmers are not able to do it, we can still do it for them and they don't even have to touch the platform. That's a great question.
And going back to that graph at the beginning, if you know that marketing is something you just really hate to do, maybe you move further to the right on that chart and you're like, well, I don't really want to sell direct to customer or try to sell to chefs or something like that. Are there wholesale opportunities I can look at? And maybe I'll get a lower price. I've got to grow more to make that work, but I can spend more time on the farm rather than on the posting to social media and updating my website and the things I don't like to do.
And also there are other points that you can still reach your customers and not necessarily have an online presence, right? Going to the farmers market, also building partnerships, joining a co-op is also helpful too, where you're able to sell your product and not necessarily have to be online. But that you'll have like that loyal base that you'll have purchasing for. But great question. And Alex, I'll toss it on over to you.
Yeah, so I mean, this actually gets back to the question around pricing and kind of figuring out what works for you and your farm. It's very hard to track if you're, if what you're growing is working financially for you if you don't keep records of what you grew. So what happens a lot is we'll have farmers tell us like, oh yeah, I'm making a lot of money at this farmer's market, and we'll kind of dig into their numbers and be like, you're making a couple $100 a week. This is not enough to cover your farm's cost. And so it's really important to keep track of, what did you grow? How much did you harvest? What did well in what areas? If you tried, different fertilizers or different seed varieties, like which things turned out well. Keeping these records is super important. And also, again, if you do think someday you may want to sell wholesale or to retailers, and you're going to need that GAP certification, that organic certification, then you're going to need these records to be able to get those certifications. So there's a lot of different ways that, farmers keep records. So it really is, again, gets back to coming up with a process that works for you. So some people will have a notepad they keep it on the tractor, or in the wash pack station. Some people, use whiteboards in their buildings. I've even seen farmers have Chromebooks or something like that in the wash pack station. One tool that we have built that might be helpful is a voice to text app where you can, set your phone down and start a voice memo and just narrate what you're doing as you're doing it. So, I harvested 15 pounds of lettuce from row number 1, and I've washed it and put it in my inventory. And it'll take that voice data and turn it into actual data points for you, and just keep track of all that stuff for you. So again, reach out to us if you want to try that tool out. We've designed it especially for folks who are growing lots of different things and need help keeping track of, I grew 50 different varieties. How much did I actually harvest of what? Rachel, I guess anything we didn't cover about things that folks should make sure they tackle in the off season while they've got a little bit more time before we kind of close out and share some resources.
I suppose if there's anything that you have to say surrounding crop planning in specific and how that ties into all of the planning that you have to do in the off season, rotational and cooperative crop planning has been a topic of interest this year, and I'm sure that farmers would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. So, to be honest with you, we are not the agronomy experts out there. So as far as, what rotations are effective, what your soil is going to need to support what, what kind of cover cropping you need to do in the off season. That's really not our expertise. But let's be honest, like farmers are generally good at that kind of stuff. And the kind of thing we like to emphasize is like, okay, you've thought about like, what variety of what is going to do well in your fields, but have you thought about like what kind of price that thing can actually fetch and how you're going to sell it? How much is it going to cost you to produce it? And like, is that actually something you want to do? So, we're kind of assuming the crop planning piece is, you already know how to do that. But again, folks like other farmers, extension agents, I don't know if that's something that ASON helps with, but there's a lot of technical assistance providers out there who are really good at that.
I was thinking more so in terms of like that latter bit of what you were saying, like what are the things that you don't necessarily think about when you're crop planning as a farmer? Like, yeah, of course, you understand like what your soil needs and what the plants need, but that also has to balance with what your books need. And like, if the thing that you want to can catch a good price, like those are also very important things to consider when you're planning your crops for during the off season.
Yeah. And this time of year can also be a really good time to do, what's called a post-mortem of, okay, I had this plan at the beginning of the year. I had my whole growing season. Now let me step back and think about what actually happened and did I follow my plan? So, one thing that's really common is I had a plan. I was going to rotate all these things. My first 2 crops took way longer to get to harvest than I expected. And so I lost a rotation or 2 within there. And so I harvested, 20% less than I expected because I had 1 less rotation. Or, I thought that I was going to be able to get this much per plant, but I only got that much. Or, I thought I was going to get this much, but I got way more. And then I didn't know what to do with it, how to sell it, how to, make sure it didn't go to waste. So really like going back and just first step, like if you haven't looked at, the plan you built last year and said like, did this plan actually go the way it was supposed to? And that'll actually give you some really good ideas of like, okay, well, let me try to plan for this year and do the pre-mortem of like, what could go wrong and how am I going to pivot during the season if some of these things don't go to plan? Because we know they won't.
Yeah, risk benefit analysis.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, this could be a fun thing to like sit down and do with other farmers and say like, here's my crop plan. Like, what risks do you see in here? And sometimes getting that fresh set of eyes on it can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions I have. I guess I think I'm good.
Okay. Well, we thank you for inviting us in for a conversation. This has been hopefully helpful for your farmers. We're keeping our contact information on the slide as well. So you can feel free to reach out to Alex or reach out to me if you all have any questions, or feel free to reach out to Rachel and she'll be able to relay your information over to us. But we hope that we gave you all a few tips and tricks for the business side of farming. As we mentioned before, we have a farm bookkeeping basics webinar happening in December. So please feel free to sign up and register today because like Alex mentioned a bit in the beginning of the webinar, she gave you a few tips, but she didn't give you all the good stuff that she has there. So we thank you all for taking the time to watch our webinar and let us know if you have any questions. Thanks, team.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great off season.
Thank y'all for coming and watching.